Scoring judge? Scoring judges, would you like to introduce yourself? Before turning off your audio and video, scoring judges, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure, I'll go ahead. Hi there, my name is Kyle Parker. I'm a former AMTA competitor at the college level. Looking forward to see you guys in action.
Hi, my name is Nicole Morote. I'm actually a current competitor with AMTA. I compete with Arizona State. I'm the president over there, and I'm really excited to see what you guys do.
Jonathan Mason, licensed attorney out of San Antonio, Texas, and I love to learn to see what you guys put together, and I'm looking forward to seeing this round. Thank you.
Thank you, judges, for coming on screen. If you will now mute your audio and video until the trial ends, that would be appreciated. You should also have your video set to hide all non-video participants. That means the only people you should see on the screen right now should be the advocates and myself. Everyone else should hide all non-video participants. So I'll give you a second to do that. All right. Can the attorneys please make their appearances?
Good afternoon, Your Honor, and members of the jury. My name is Peyton Roberson, and I'm joined by my second chair today, Miss Elizabeth Beaver. Together, we represent the prosecution of the United States of America.
Good evening, Your Honor, members of the jury and opposing counsel. My name is Paul Atherton, and today, alongside my co-counsel, Ms. Gabriela Rao, we will be representing Cara Bassett, the defendant in today's case.
Okay, we will now hear opening statements from each party.
Yes, Your Honor.
Everyone should make sure they're in speaker view, please. And attorneys who are not speaking, please mute.
Permission to proceed, Your Honor.
You may.
The defendant had enough. Dawn Clark wouldn't give her what she wanted. Control. She begged, she pleaded, but it did nothing. So when her husband wouldn't let her call the shots, she delivered a shot to her husband. And good afternoon. My name is Peyton Roberson, and I stand here representing you, the people of the United States of America. As the prosecution, we bear and welcome the burden of proof. We must prove beyond a reasonable doubt that the defendant killed Dawn Clark with malice aforethought, meaning that she killed him deliberately and intentionally. Now, in the state of Florida, just outside Tallahassee, there's a large elephant zoo. It was owned by a wealthy local businessman, Dawn Clark. Now, on the surface, everything seemed fine. Everything except for his wife, the defendant. You see, she was sick and tired of fighting with her husband, fighting for control over the zoo. But no matter what she did, her husband wouldn't give it to her. So in August of 2017, she decided to take matters into her own hands. Now you'll hear today about a certain poison at the zoo, a poison called carfentanil. It's extremely dangerous, a poison strong enough to kill a grown man. The defendant knew this, and she had the key to the poison. So what does she do? She sneaks into the shed, walks over to the poison, and takes an entire syringe, more than enough poison to kill a single man. And on August 18th, she's had enough. That night, she quietly sneaks up behind her husband, takes out that entire syringe of poison, raises her hand, plunges it into his arm. He falls to the ground, convulses, and goes still. And why? All because the defendant couldn't call the shots. She delivered a shot to her husband. But then the defendant has to dispose of the body. So she loads Clark up in the back of the zoo van, drives over 100 miles to a swamp, takes all that's left of her husband, and dumps him over. Gone without a trace. Now, Mr. Atherton will come up here in a minute and tell you that his body was never recovered. And he's right. But the defendant didn't realize that she brought back traces of the swamp with her. She didn't realize that the van's GPS tracked her entire trip. Now, you're going to hear a lot of evidence today. I want you to pay attention to three main points. First, the physical and forensic evidence. The missing poison, the DNA strands, the GPS data, and the missing boots. Second, her reaction. Consider if the defendant's actions were consistent with that of an innocent person. And third, the motive. According to Clark's power of attorney, all the defendant had to do was make her husband disappear, and she would get exactly what she wanted. She would call the shots. The defendant thought she won. When her husband wouldn't let her call the shots, she delivered a shot to her husband. Find the defendant guilty. Thank you.
Defense opening statement, Your Honor.
You may proceed.
Thank you, Your Honor. May it please the court, members of the jury. Have you ever thought of leaving it all behind? No goodbyes and no eyewitnesses. But just because nobody saw Don Clark following the night of August 18th means that he's dead. Today you're going to hear about Cara Bassett. Miss Bassett is a compassionate, loving woman who married Don Clark the year 2011. The two had a business partnership in owning the Greater Tallahassee Elephant Park. They owned it phenomenally. But all of this changed the night of August 18th, 2017. The two were watching television together at 9 p.m. Cara Bassett kissed Don Clark on the cheek and said she was going to bed. But little to her knowledge, that was going to be the final kiss and the final time she would ever see her own husband. Because as the proof will show, Don Clark had and continues to have a residence in Hermosa Beach, Costa Rica. It was to this location he fled the night of August 18, 2017. And yet, the prosecution has charged my client with murder. For clarification, they have the burden of proof in today's case, which means they have to prove to you three things beyond a reasonable doubt. 1, that Don Clark is dead. 2, that Cara Bassett killed him. And 3, that she did so with malice aforethought. The fact of the matter is, members of the jury, the prosecution's case today is going to be like a square peg. The genuine facts around the night of August 18th are like a round hole. Their proof simply does not fit. Today you'll hear from 2 witnesses, the first of which will be Agent Braun. Agent Braun will identify that despite the fact that he found no body, he did find somebody who had both motive and opportunity to kill Don Clark, assuming he is dead in the first place. You'll then hear from Joe Young, who will identify the fact that when he went to Costa Rica, specifically Don Clark's property, a year after the disappearance of Don Clark, he discovered visual evidence identifying the fact that Don Clark still resides in that property. All of these facts, members of the jury, lead to two words: reasonable doubt. But consider that question once more. Have you ever thought of leaving it all behind? Those words hold significant meaning for this trial, because as the proof will show, those are the very thoughts manifested within the mind of Don Clark. Leaving it all behind. Members of the jury, once again, the prosecution today is going to build a case based on two words: reasonable doubt. And reasonable doubt upon reasonable doubt upon reasonable doubt does not support a guilty verdict, which is why we ask that you find in favor of the defendant. Thank you.
Thank you. Before our first witness, before the government calls our first witness, I'll ask everyone to please switch to gallery view. That button is in the upper right-hand corner of your screen. This will allow you to see the attorneys and the witness at the same time. Prosecution, you may proceed.
Yes, Your Honor. The prosecution calls Steph Branham to the stand. Could you please introduce yourself?
Hello there. My name is Agent Stephanie Branham.
And Agent Branham, what do you do for a living?
I worked for the FBI, specializing in the Violent Crimes Division.
And how long have you worked with the FBI for?
Just over 18 years now, sir.
And what type of cases have you investigated during your time there?
Everything from serial murder, kidnapping, and bank robberies to gang crimes and human trafficking.
So Agent Branham, why are you here today?
I was the lead investigator for the disappearance of Don Clark in 2017, sir.
I'd like to talk more about your investigation. Where did you start?
I started when I received a missing persons report from the defendant, Miss Bassett.
And when did the defendant call that her husband was missing?
She reported Mr. Clark missing on August 25th, 2017.
And how long had he been missing for?
He had been missing for approximately 1 week. He actually went missing on August 18th, 2017. However, the report was again filed 1 week later.
Now, in that week before the defendant called you, were you able to determine if she ever tried contacting her husband?
Not from what I saw from her own phone records, Exhibit 22.
Ms. Beaver, if you could display Exhibit 22 for the jury, please. Now, once that comes up in a minute, they'll be showing you Exhibit 22 of the phone records. Now,
Yes, I've seen it before.
Now, according to that exhibit, how many times did the defendant try contacting her husband?
I've seen the exhibit before, so I don't need to see it right now if it's not working. The defendant never reached out to Mr. Clark after he went missing, not through text or call.
And how many times did she try calling him?
0 times. She never reached out to him.
And did the defendant tell you how many phones she had?
She only had one phone, sir.
Now, if the defendant wasn't calling her husband, then who was she calling?
She was calling for takeout. As you can see, it's a soup company.
Now, if the defendant never tried contacting her husband, then when did she last see him?
She claimed to have last seen him on August 18th, 2017.
And were you able to determine where she was that night?
She had told me she was at the Greater Tallahassee Elephant Park all night.
And were you able to determine if that was true?
From the GPS records I found, that was not the case.
I'd like to talk more about those GPS records. Ms. Beaver, if you could display Exhibit 31 to the jury. Now, once that comes up, I'll be showing you those GPS records that we were just talking about for the van. According to that document, where did the van go that night?
The van left the Greater Tallahassee Elephant Park at approximately 11:14 p.m. Then the van traveled 139 miles east, arriving at Big Gum Swamp. It stayed at Big Gum Swamp for 44 minutes until driving back 135 miles, staying at the Cary Bell Leon Airport.
Now, did you ever search that van?
Yes, sir. We found a missing vehicle at the Kelly Leon Airport, and that's where I searched. I found 6 of Mr. Clark's hairs in the back seat, algae on the pedals, and this GPS report.
Objection, Your Honor. This is an improper opinion. May I be heard? May I be heard, Your Honor?
Yes, you may.
Your Honor, it identifies in Rule 703 that experts can provide opinions in relation to and as a result of evidence they have gathered or been made aware of. However, Your Honor, this agent has yet to be tendered as such. Therefore, she cannot provide an opinion in relation to this.
Response?
Your Honor, I'd like to clarify what opinion opposing counsel is objecting to.
May I respond? Your Honor?
Defense? Yes.
Yes, Your Honor, we're simply referring to the fact that as a result, or rather the ideation that as a result of this evidence, Agent Branham came to an opinion.
Your Honor, may I be heard?
Yes.
Your Honor, I don't believe the witness gave an opinion. She's merely testifying to what she found at the van. Your Honor, doesn't require any opinion. She's merely testifying to facts.
Overruled.
Yes, Your Honor.
Continue.
Now, you mentioned algae. Did you find that algae at the elephant park?
Yes, sir. I found a sample of the same algae on the sole of Miss Bassett's boots. I had it tested by a forensic biologist, and the results came back as a highly likely match, all connecting back to Big Gum Swamp.
Now, Agent Branham, as a part of your investigation, did you ever search the elephant zoo?
Yes, sir. I had to do a thorough search there.
And what did you find?
I found that a missing elephant tranquilizer had been missing and was unaccounted for.
I'd like to talk more about that. Ms. Beaver, if you could display Exhibit 17 for the jury. Now, I'm showing you the material safety data sheet for carfentanil, that substance we were just talking about. How deadly is it?
Yes, carfentanil inside that elephant tranquilizer, as you can see in segment 2.3, it's 5,000 times more toxic than heroin.
And how much is lethal to an adult human?
1 milligram. In these elephant tranquilizers, in one syringe, there was 10.
Now, how many syringes of carfentanil did the elephant park have?
24. They had 23. However, the log I found showing how many there should have been 24.
Now, were you ever able to account for that missing syringe?
No, sir. I asked the defendant, and she did not have an answer as to why that was missing.
Now, did you ever talk to the defendant about the poison?
Yes, sir, I did.
And what was her reaction?
She
Objection
laughed.
under Rule 802, hearsay.
May I be heard, Your Honor?
You may.
Your Honor, I merely asked the witness if she talked to the defendant. No statements were elicited. Furthermore, Your Honor, if any statements were elicited, Kara Bassett is the party opponent of the prosecution, so her statements fall under hearsay exception 801 D2A.
May I respond, Your Honor?
You may.
May I ask the court to instruct opposing counsel to provide a specific subsection they will be applying in Rule 801 Section D, subsection 2?
Your Honor, 801 D2A, Your Honor.
Thank you.
May I respond to that, Your Honor?
You may.
Your Honor, under Rule 801 Section D, subsection 2-A, it identifies an individual can provide an admission by a party opponent in the event it is contained within that individual's representative or individual capacity. However, Your Honor, that rule applies to the hearer of the statement, not the declarant of the statement.
What was the question you asked?
I asked the defendant, I asked Ms. Branham if she ever talked to the defendant. I was not asking about any statements elicited.
Overruled. Continue.
So Ms. Branham, what was her reaction when you asked her about the poison?
She laughed.
Once again, Your Honor, we would object under Rule 802. And in doing so, we would direct the court's attention to Rule 801 Section C, as it identifies that hearsay can be nonverbal conduct. In this case, a reaction.
May I be heard, Your Honor?
Yes.
Your Honor, 801C specifically says nonverbal conduct meant as an assertion. Your Honor, if I may proffer.
You may.
The reaction that Ms. Branham is going to talk to is that she laughs. Your Honor, laughing is not an assertion, and therefore it does not apply in this case. Furthermore, the defendant is the party opponent, and therefore any of her statements do come in under Rule 801 D2A.
Overruled. Continue.
Yes, Your Honor.
So Ms. Branham, what was her reaction?
She laughed, sir.
And did she ever say if she knew how deadly the poison was?
Yes, she did. She told me in detail that she knew exactly 20 milligrams were lethal to a human of the substance tarfentanyl.
Now, Agent Branham, over the course of your investigation, could you determine if anyone had a motive to make Clark disappear?
Yes, sir, Miss Kara Bassett.
Now, Ms. Beaver, if you could display Exhibit 15 for the jury. Now, I'm showing you Clark's power of attorney. Under what condition would the defendant get this power?
As you can see under the effective date, Miss Clark would obtain power of all Mr. Clark's assets if he were to become physically unable or if he were to disappear.
And what would the defendant control?
All of Mr. Clark's assets listed here, stocks, bonds, as well as the elephant park, sir.
Now, Agent Branham, with all this information you collected over the course of your investigation, what did you do?
Now, with the evidence I collected, each individual piece did not give me enough reason to arrest the defendant. However, when all this came together, it all pointed to the defendant, and that's when I decided to arrest her in October of 2018.
Your Honor, once again, this is an improper opinion. May I be heard under Rule 201, Section E?
You are objecting to her saying, I decided to arrest her. Is that correct?
Yes, Your Honor, the entirety of that answer.
Okay.
May I first provide an elaboration, Your Honor?
You may.
Opposing counsel, or rather, Miss Agent Branham, identified the reasoning why she arrested Kara Bassett. Moreover, she did so by way of collecting certain evidence. However, Your Honor, because the evidence does not fall within her lay opinion, it is therefore an inadmissible opinion.
May I be heard, Your Honor?
You may.
Your Honor, Agent Branham is not offering an opinion. She's merely testifying to what she did, that she arrested Kara Bassett. She's not offering any expert opinion about who's guilty in this case, merely what she did as a result of her investigation.
Overruled.
Yes, Your Honor.
Would you like to finish your answer, Agent Branham?
Yes, sir. After all the evidence I collected, together it all helped me. It led me to arrest the defendant in September of 2018.
Thank you, Agent Branham. Your Honor, I have no further questions at this time.
Defense,
Yes, Your Honor. Cross-examination.
please.
Good evening, Agent Braun. My name is Paul Atherton, and I'll be asking you a few questions today.
Hello, sir.
Now, I'd like to talk about your investigation throughout the night of August 18th, or in relation to that. You would agree with me that you examined all around the Elephant Park, correct?
Yes, I did.
You examined, for example, the visitor center, correct?
That was one part of my investigation, yes.
You found no indications of violence, correct?
No, sir.
You looked at, additionally, the park's vehicles, correct?
That I did?
You found no indications of violence, correct?
No, sir.
You then proceeded to specifically investigate the Clark's own residence, right?
That was a part of my investigation.
Where you found no indications of violence.
No, that didn't cooperate with my theory.
All right. Well, you would agree with me that the next step of your investigation took place at the Caribel Airport, yes?
Yes, that's true.
You would agree with me that you found fingerprints, correct?
Yes, I did.
Specifically, for the subject of forensics was most definitely able to apply in your examination of that van, correct?
What's your question?
You would agree with me that you found a lot of forensic evidence throughout the van, correct?
Yes, we found fingerprints, Mr. Clark's hairs, and algae.
You would agree with me that in reference to the algae, you believe that it originated from the Big Gum Swamp.
That's not my opinion, sir. That's the opinion of a professional forensic biologist, marked as Exhibit 5.
Well, I appreciate that, ma'am, but I'm not asking about another person's opinion. I'm asking about your opinion. Yes or no, the algae found in the van originated from the Big Gum Swamp.
Well, sir, it's not my opinion. It's based off Exhibit 5. Exhibit 5 stated that it was a highly likely match from the algae on the shoe, the pedal, to the algae on Big Gum Swamp. I can't give an opinion on that.
To examine that exhibit in just a moment, but let's take a few baby steps. You would agree with me that you first examined Cara Bassett's boots, correct?
Yes, I did.
Let the record reflect that Ms. Rowell will be showing an image of Exhibit 29. Are these the boots that you were referring to initially?
Yes, it is.
You would agree with me that the algae, or rather the dirty substance around the bottom of the boots, is algae, right?
Algae and dirt, yes.
And you believe that the algae originated from the Big Gum Swamp, as you mentioned a moment ago.
Again, sir, that's not my opinion.
Well, regardless, I'd like to talk about what you mentioned earlier, the forensics report. We'll let the record reflect that Ms. Rowell will be showing an image of one of the exhibits, specifically the forensics report. Can you see it, Doctor?
Yes, I can.
Now, specifically, I would like to talk about the third page, paragraph 3, as you can see right there. Can you see the highlighted portion?
Yes, sir.
Please read silently while I read aloud. Samples 1 through 3 and 8 through 11 likely originated from the Big Gum Swamp. This is not certain. Did I read that correctly?
Yes, and it continues, but is highly likely.
Well, I appreciate that, but what I read was correct, yes?
Of course, you just didn't finish the sentence, sir.
Regardless, you would agree with me that it was not confirmed that the algae originated from the Big Gum Swamp.
No, it was not. It was a highly likely match.
Thank you, Agent. Now I'd like to talk about the second highlighted portion, if that exhibit could be shown once again. Once again, please read silently while I read aloud. We did not test or collect any samples from Big Gum Swamp against any natural substances at the Greater Tallahassee Elephant Park or other Florida swamps. Now, did I read that correctly?
Yes, sir, you did.
So for clarification, you would agree with me that you did not, or rather the forensics team did not compare that algae to what could have been found at Cara Bassett's workplace.
That's true. They simply compared the two algae alone.
Right, but in addition to that, you would agree with me that algae can attach to a surface for months, right?
That's not my expertise, sir.
I appreciate that, ma'am, but as found in this exhibit, you would agree with me that algae can attach for months, yes or no?
That's what the exhibit says. I don't know.
Well, regardless, you would agree with me that that algae found on the boots of Cara Bassett, or rather the algae found on the foot pedals, could have originated months prior to the night of August 18th, based upon your seemingly lay opinion, correct?
I don't know that, sir.
All right, well, regardless, you have been to the elephant park, as you mentioned a moment ago, correct?
Yes, I have.
So you would recognize a picture of the elephant park, correct?
Of course, sir.
Let the record reflect that Ms. Rowell will be showing an image of Exhibit 24. Can you see it well, Agent?
Yes, sir.
You would agree with me that there is in fact mud found within this exhibit, correct?
Yes.
And you would agree with me that algae is discovered within mud customarily. Is that correct?
That's again what the forensic report says. I don't have personal knowledge of algae.
Regardless, you would agree with me that you cannot decipher whether or not the algae from the boots originated from that elephant park or the Big Gum Swamp. Is that correct?
I can determine that it's highly likely that the algae on Miss Bassett's boots originated from Big Gum Swamp.
Thank you, ma'am. But regardless, you would agree with me that you then examined phone records, correct?
Yes, sir.
You would agree with me that the phone records indicated that Cara Bassett had not left the park from August 18th to August 25th, correct?
No, sir, she had not.
So you would agree with me that based purely upon those records, Cara Bassett did not leave the park.
Her phone records indicated she was ordering takeout, meaning that she was staying at the house. Yes.
Regardless, you would agree with me that you also received notice of cash that was off the books, correct?
I received that in an email from Mandy Tuminelli, Mr. Clark's attorney.
You would agree with me that Mandy Tuminelli identified the fact that Don Clark wanted cash that was off the books to be transferred to his property in Costa Rica. Yes or no?
Yes, he was planning on it, but didn't follow through.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Thank you.
Permission for a brief redirect, Your Honor.
You may proceed.
Now, Agent Branham, opposing counsel asked you about how there was no sign of violence at the elephant zoo. Does injecting someone with poison require violence?
No, sir. The signs of violence were with my theory of these inserting a syringe that would not result in violence.
And he also asked you about algae. How do you know it is very likely come from the Big Gum Swamp?
This is based off Exhibit 5 and the forensic biologist that conducted that part of the investigation.
And lastly, opposing counsel asked you about how the defendant supposedly never left her house. Based on the GPS reports, is that true?
No, sir. The GPS indicated that she had left the property to go to Big Gum Swamp that night on August 18th, 2017.
Thank you, Agent Branham. I have no further questions, Your Honor.
Brief recross, Your Honor.
You may proceed.
You would agree with me that neither you nor anyone else found an empty tranquilizer.
Objection, Your Honor, outside the scope of my cross-examination, redirect examination.
May I be heard?
Yes.
Your Honor, opposing counsel further elaborated upon Agent Branham's examination and investigation pertaining to the events of August 18th. I'm simply further elaborating on that point.
May I be heard, Your Honor?
You may.
Your Honor, I asked Agent Branham about three things. First of all, Your Honor, whether there were signs of violence. Secondly, whether about the GPS records. And thirdly, about how the algae would have matched Big Gum Swamp. Your Honor, none of those involve any missing syringes. Therefore, this is outside the scope of my redirect.
May I respond once more, Your Honor?
You may.
As opposing counsel mentioned, there were no signs of violence. However, Your Honor, syringes most certainly could represent violence. I'm simply further elaborating on that point.
Overruled.
Thank you, Your Honor. May I re-ask?
You may.
Agent Branham, you never discovered an empty tranquilizer. Is that correct?
Yes, it is.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Any redirect?
No redirect, Your Honor.
Okay. This witness is excused with the thanks of the court.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Yes, Your Honor. The defense calls Joe Young to the stand. May I proceed?
You may.
Good evening. Please state your name for the benefit of the court.
Hi, everyone. My name is Joe Young.
What do you do for a living, Mr. Young?
Well, right now I'm a TV producer. I actually got my start back in Minnesota. I went to film school there. I made a couple movies you might have heard of. I did this one. It was called Fargo. It was a mixture of Fargo and Argo. It didn't exactly go too well. I think it has a 2% on Rotten Tomatoes. So I mostly do documentaries now.
Mr. Young, I would like to say I do like your accent. Where are you from, if I may ask?
Oh, I'm actually from Harmony, Minnesota. It's a small town. They have more cows than people, so quite an interesting place to grow up.
All right, now, Mr. Young, are you familiar with the defendant, Ms. Cara Bassett?
I am, yeah. I worked on a TV show. We were making a documentary with Miss Bassett.
And if you don't mind, elaborate on how your relationship with Miss Bassett commenced.
Well, she contacted me back in 2015, and she said that she wanted me to make a documentary about her and the elephant park that she worked at. And then for the next about 3 years, I worked with Miss Bassett making that documentary.
Now, are you also familiar with Don Clark?
Yeah, I am. That was Kara's husband. I would work with him sometimes when I was filming stuff for the documentary.
And so how long were you acquainted with the two of them?
Well, I filmed the documentary for 3 years, so that's how long I was with Kara, but it was about 2 years for Don.
All right. Now, Mr. Young, were you working the day of August 18th, 2017?
I was, yeah. I was at the elephant park that day.
And when, if ever, did you see Mr. Clark?
I saw him at about 6 p.m. that day. I was having a conversation with him about my upcoming trip I was planning. I was going to Mexico City, going to get myself some papas fritas, and that's when I talked to Don.
And when, if ever, did an odd part of that conversation commence?
Well, we were just talking about the trip, and all of a sudden at 6 p.m., Mr. Clark, he just looks down at his phone and his face, it went white, and he just got up and he had to leave the room. He said he had to deal with it.
And what, if anything, did you see Mr. Clark do following this?
Well, I didn't really see him after that because he just left the room. He took his phone with him and he went out to go take care of whatever was going on.
All right, now, when, if ever, did you see a conversation between Cara Bassett and Mr. Clark?
I had seen them talking earlier that day when I was at the elephant park. They were on the phone together. And, Miss Bassett just said to him, I think they were talking about an upcoming trip. So she said that it was fine he was going without her and that, she was fine with that. She said, "I love you, sweetheart."
All right. Well, after you had these conversations and heard these conversations of Mr. Clark, what, if anything, did you do afterwards?
Well, after I heard that conversation, I left the elephant park that night, came to my trip the next morning, and then when I got back from my trip to Mexico City, I found out that Don Clark had gone missing.
Now, how exactly did you become aware of this?
Well, I got back and I saw that the FBI was actually at the park, kind of looking around to see what they could find. I talked to Kara and she said that they were investigating Don's disappearance.
Now, based purely upon your own observations, how did the FBI investigation appear to be?
Well, it was kind of strange to me because when I saw the FBI walking around, I saw them handling some evidence and they weren't wearing gloves when they did it. There were 2 times I saw that And one of that time was when they were touching the elephant tranquilizer. You know, and I also was never really interviewed by the FBI. I was barely asked anything, even though I worked at the park for 2 years before that. And at that time, you know, I had 2,000 hours of film for my documentary, but they never asked to see any of it.
All right. Well, regardless of the seemingly faulty investigation, did you speak to Miss Bassett when she returned?
I did speak with Kara. Yeah, I wanted to see how she was doing. You know, that's a really hard thing to go through.
How did Miss Bassett appear to be doing?
She was not the Kara that I used to know. You know, she was very upset about what had happened. You know, she was depressed, I would say.
Now, did you, or rather, when, if ever, did you conduct interviews?
I conducted interviews for my documentary just to get some behind the scenes kind of footage. And so I did those before and after Dawn went missing. And I did them with Kara Bassett and then also a park employee. Her name was Kelsey Stebbins.
Would you be able to recognize one of those interviews of Miss Stebbins?
You betcha.
Now, I'd like to show one of those videos, but first, if I may ask, do you customarily make these sort of interviews within your occupation?
Oh yeah, all the time. You know, in order for it to be a documentary, you got to have videos and interviews. So that's a lot of what I do.
Right. And after conducting this interview, or rather after formulating this interview, did you keep it within the customary practice of your occupation as a filmmaker?
Yeah, I did. I kept it on my laptop, you know, so that once the documentary was done, I could just put it right in.
Your Honor, at this time, the defense enters Exhibit 45 into evidence. Its authenticity has been stipulated and it has been identified by the witness.
I have no objections under Rule 803-6, Your Honor.
It's admitted without objection.
Thank you, Your Honor. Let the record reflect that Ms. Rowell will be showing an image, or rather a video, of Exhibit 45.
One day, Don came up to me and shook his head. He said, "Have you ever thought about just leaving it all behind? No goodbyes, no see you laters, just up and leaving in the middle of the night?"
Were you able to hear that, Mr. Young?
I was, yeah, that's the video I took of Miss Stebbins.
What, if anything, did that video do to you in relation to how you believe Don Clark was acting?
Well, you know, I just found it really strange because I just didn't think Don Clark would disappear. But then, you know, I see this video and he's talking about just up and leaving. And I guess that's exactly what happened.
Well, Mr. Young, what, if anything, did you do after the investigation process?
Well, you know, I wanted to investigate on my own for the documentary. So I actually then took another trip. I went to Costa Rica where Don had a house. And I just investigated around there, did some looking around.
And where all did you look around?
I looked around the outside of the house, around some close parts in Costa Rica, and then also the inside.
When, if ever, did you discuss matters regarding Don Clark with people of the community?
I talked to them about it when I was in Costa Rica during that trip. I asked them if they'd seen Don Clark, and some of them said that they thought they'd seen him around the island.
Objection, Your Honor. Hearsay. May I be heard?
You may.
Your Honor, opposing counsel is referencing out-of-court statements made by locals in Costa Rica for the truth of the matter asserted that they had seen Don Clark.
May I be heard, Your Honor?
You may.
This falls under multiple rules. First, this falls under Rule 803-19 as well as Rule 803-21, as they pertain to the community's understanding of Don Clark's reputation. Additionally, Your Honor, this falls under Rule 803-3 as it pertains to Don Clark's intent to move to Costa Rica, as he was in Costa Rica. And finally, this falls under Rule 807, Section A, as it is being offered as a material fact. It is being offered to be trustworthy. It is more probative than prejudicial, and it most certainly serves the best interests of justice.
May I be
Where
heard
would
after
you like
that,
to
Your Honor?
start? Go ahead.
Yes, Your Honor. First, to opposing counsel's 803.19 response. Your Honor, that strictly deals with a person's reputation. Asking if they've seen Don Clark, Your Honor, that has nothing to do with his reputation and therefore does not apply under 803.18. Under Rule 803.3, the last line of it says, except including a fact belief. Your Honor, facts believe are not included under Rule 803.3. Asking the people if they believe they saw Don Clark, that would therefore not apply under 803.3. Lastly, opposing counsel reference Rule 807A. Your Honor, this is substantially more prejudicial than probative in that we can't judge the credibility of these people's reports. We don't know, there's no corroborating evidence. We can't judge if their reports are true or not because they're not here in court today.
May I respond on all three accounts, Your Honor?
You may.
First, to opposing counsel's 803.3 objection, or rather response, we would most certainly contest that, as it identifies specifically in the rule that it applies to motivation and intent of an individual to take an action. Moreover, Your Honor, this most certainly applies as it goes to the fact that Don Clark moved to Costa Rica. Additionally, to opposing counsel's second response regarding 803.19 as well as 803.21, it explicitly identifies the word community. Your Honor, community in this case refers to the Hermosa Beach community to which Mr. Young asked in relation to Don Clark's presence. And therefore, it most certainly falls under those two exceptions. But additionally, Your Honor, we would most certainly contest opposing counsel's elaboration on their response of 807. There is no prejudicial effect within this testimony. Therefore, it falls under all three, or rather all four of those rules.
Overruled. Continue.
Yes, sir.
Would you like me to restate the question?
No, that's okay. I was just saying that when I went to Costa Rica, I spoke with some of the locals, and they told me that they thought they'd seen Don around recently, and that was in 2018.
To put it simply, Mr. Young, based upon your experience dealing with Cara Bassett, do you believe that she killed Don Clark?
No, I would never see Kara doing that. I just don't see that happening.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Go ahead.
Proceed with cross-examination, Your Honor.
You may.
Now, Mr. Young, you've talked a lot about the defendant and her husband's relationship. You've actually seen the two of them fight.
I have, yeah. They fight like every couple.
Fight several times.
Yeah, over the course that I saw them, they did.
They would fight over who would call the shots.
Yeah, they would fight over the elephant park. Yeah, not like the shots in their marriage or anything.
Now, one of those fights was about a month before Clark disappeared.
That's true.
The defendant seemed angry.
That's what I thought, yeah, but, sometimes she would just get a little upset when her and Don would fight.
So she seemed angry about how her husband ran the zoo.
Yeah, that's what it seemed like to me.
Don Clark wouldn't turn it into a sanctuary.
No, he wanted to keep it as a business.
He wouldn't turn into a sanctuary no matter what the defendant did.
That's true. He wanted to keep it how it was already run.
Objection, Your Honor, under Rule 402, relevance.
May I be heard, Your Honor?
You may.
Your Honor, this evidence is extremely relevant as it goes to the defendant's motive. Your Honor, it's the prosecution's contention that Cara Bassett killed Don Clark because she couldn't call the shots. Your Honor, we're showing how her husband wouldn't let her call the shots.
May I respond?
Of course.
Your Honor, the intentions regarding what the park was to be have no relevance, specifically in reference to the contrast of Don Clark's opinions and Cara Bassett's opinions. We're only here for Miss Bassett, Your Honor.
Overruled.
Thank
Yes.
you, Your Honor.
So just to clarify, Mr. Young, Don Clark wouldn't turn it into a sanctuary no matter what the defendant did.
Right, he wanted to keep it as a business.
And during that fight, you actually saw the defendant assault her husband.
No, I wouldn't say she
Your
assaulted
Honor, under Rule 403, this is unfairly prejudicial.
Response?
Yes, Your Honor. The whole reason we're here today is because the charge that Kara Bassett killed her husband. Your Honor, any evidence showing that she had assaulted him in the past is extremely relevant in this case. There's no prejudicial effect.
May I respond?
Certainly.
Your Honor, if I may elaborate, my objection was not to the relevance of this testimony. Rather, it was the unfair prejudice of it. Moreover, Your Honor, if opposing counsel is truly attempting to provide evidence that one of the two may have fought, Your Honor, that can most certainly inflame the passions of the jury. And nobody wants that, Your Honor, and that is because it is inadmissible under Rule 403.
Have you heard, Your Honor?
You may.
The standard under Rule 403 is that this evidence must be substantially more prejudicial than probative. Your Honor, asking this witness about how the defendant had assaulted her husband in the past, Your Honor, that is extremely probative as it helps the jury determine if Kara Bassett killed her husband. Your Honor, there's no prejudicial effect involved.
Overruled.
Yes, Your Honor.
So, Mr. Young, you did see the defendant assault her husband.
I wouldn't say she assaulted him, no.
Well, she threw a vase at him.
Yeah, she did throw a vase at his head, but I mean, I wouldn't really call that assault. It didn't hit him.
Oh, exactly. Well, she threw it right at his head.
Yeah, but you know, she missed. Kara's kind of a terrible shot.
And this was all over a fight over who gets to call the shots with the elephants.
Yeah, you know, that's what they fought about sometimes.
Now, you talked a lot about your documentary earlier. I'd like to take a look at a clip from that. Now, you have your electronic notebook of exhibits in front of you.
I do, yeah.
I'd like you to take a look at Exhibit 38. You're familiar with that?
Yep, yeah, I am. I took that video.
And that's a video clip of the defendant.
It is, yeah.
It's a fair and accurate copy.
You betcha.
Your Honor, I move to enter this video clip as Exhibit 38.
Any objections?
No objections, Your Honor.
It's admitted without objection.
Now, the defendant actually said something that was interesting. Ms. Beaver, if you could display that for the jury. I believe it'll be loading just 1 second for you.
Okay.
Well, you are familiar with the statements included in that exhibit, correct?
Yeah, I am. I took the video, so I know what she said.
So the defendant said she would do anything to protect those elephants.
Yeah, that's what she said. You know, Kara cared a lot about those elephants. She loved them.
If she had to, she would kill someone.
She said she would take someone to their grave. I think it was more a figure of speech, though.
So just to clarify, she said she would take someone to their grave if she has to.
Yeah, but I don't really think she meant that literally, you know.
But that is what she said, correct?
Yeah, that's what she said.
And, you talked about your trip to Costa Rica. So you know Clark's not in Costa Rica, right?
No, I wouldn't say that I know he's not in Costa Rica. I think he might be.
Well, you went to his house.
Yeah, I did.
No lights were on.
No, but the fan was on.
There's no food in the fridge.
No, there was no food, but there were clothes.
You never saw anyone in that house.
No, I personally didn't see anyone. That's true.
You stayed there for a whole week.
Yeah, I was there for a week. It was a pretty good trip.
You never saw anyone enter that house?
No.
You never saw anyone leave?
No, I didn't.
During that entire week in Costa Rica, you never saw Don Clark.
No, but, you know, I heard he was there.
Now, I'd like to talk about the defendant's reaction when her husband went missing. Tell me, did you find her behavior odd?
I wouldn't say I found it odd. No, not really.
Well, I mean, her husband had just disappeared, right?
Yeah, it was a weird thing.
To your knowledge, she didn't text him?
Not that I know of, no.
She didn't call him?
No, I don't really know.
Well, to your knowledge, she didn't even mention him.
Well, she mentioned him to me when I got back.
But during the week before she called the police, she never mentioned him.
I mean, I don't really know. I wasn't there during that week. I was in Mexico City.
Well, and to your knowledge, what you've heard today, she waited a whole week before calling the police.
That's what the agent said, yeah.
Thank you. Your Honor, I have no further questions.
Brief redirect, Your Honor.
You may.
Mr. Young, opposing counsel referenced what you didn't see at the Costa Rican house, but what did you see?
So I saw that a fan was on, Don Clark's clothes were hanging in the closet, and the place was completely clean, like someone had just cleaned it.
And what did you hear?
I heard that Don Clark was in Costa Rica.
No further questions, Your Honor.
A brief recross, Your Honor.
You may proceed.
Now, opposing counsel asked you about your trip to Costa Rica and specifically what the locals said. They didn't provide any details about Clark, did they?
No, just that they'd seen him.
Well, actually, they weren't even completely sure they had seen him.
No, that's just what they said. They thought they'd seen him.
Thank you. Your Honor, I have no further questions.
Okay. We will now hear closing arguments from each party. Everyone should switch back to speaker view. And since every party has completed their testimony, scoring judges, you're welcome to complete the witness portion of your ballot. Prosecution, you may proceed.
Yes, Your Honor. And I'd ask that all remaining time I have be reserved for a rebuttal.
That will be so.
The defendant was furious. Don Clark wouldn't give her control, so she made him disappear. When her husband wouldn't let her call the shots, she delivered a shot to her husband. Now, in a moment, the judge will instruct you on the law. She'll tell you that as the prosecution, we bear the burden of proof. And we welcome that burden. We must prove beyond a reasonable doubt that the defendant killed Don Clark with malice aforethought, that the defendant killed him deliberately and intentionally. And we listen to the judge describe that burden. There's a word the defense tends to downplay, but is still important. The word reasonable. The standard is beyond a reasonable doubt. Your decision must be based on reason and common sense. You don't check your common sense at the door when you step into a courthouse or when you sign into Zoom. So let's do that. Let's use our common sense and look back at the evidence. First, what was her motive? Easy, she wanted to call the shots. When Don Clark disappeared, the first place you'd look is the person who benefits the most, right? I'd like you to take a look at Exhibit 15, power of attorney. It says the defendant would get all of his assets if, and here's the strange part, if he disappears. Now, I don't know what you have done with estate planning, but that's not something that's normal. You don't typically plan on disappearing, do you? She did. And what did she gain? The money, the assets, the zoo, everything. She would have control. She would call the shots. But Dawn Clark wouldn't let her. When her husband wouldn't let her call the shots, she decided to use a shot of poison. Take a look at Exhibit 17 and 18. Carfentanil, a deadly poison, a poison 5,000 times more toxic than heroin. You only need a few drops to kill a grown man. So when her husband wouldn't let her call the shots, she delivered that shot. The defendant administers the poison, watches Clark convulse, and then lay motionless. But she has a problem. She has a body to dispose of. So she loads Clark up, drives over 100 miles, and parks near a swamp. Takes a wheelchair, pushes him over, tips the body, tries to destroy the last trace of the man she once claimed to love. She thought no one would know. She thought her secret was safe. She didn't realize that the van's GPS tracked her entire trip. She didn't realize that she brought back traces of the swamp with her. She didn't realize that Dawn Clark's hair was found in the back of the van. She didn't realize that her boots, the wheelchair, the van were all covered in algae. The same algae that's found where? The Big Gum Swamp. You know what? The defendant left her husband behind in the swamp. And there's something I want you to think about. What would you do if a loved one went missing? Wouldn't you be worried? Wouldn't you do something? But what was on the defendant's mind? What was she concerned about? Soup. Not one message, not two, but 3 messages about Soup, and not a word about her missing husband. A whole week goes by. But let's not just look at her thoughts. Let's look at her actions. What did she do? Does she message Clark? Does she call him? No, not a single call or text. She had her phone right in her hand. And what effort do you see to find her missing husband? And why is that? Because the defendant knew she wouldn't get an answer. She knew exactly where her husband was. And consider this, when police ask her about the missing poison, what did she do? She laughs. Let me repeat that, she laughs. Now, do you think there's something funny about a man who's gone missing? A man who might be dead? Do you think there's something funny about poison? Well, then why did she? The defendant got exactly what she wanted. All she had to do, make her husband disappear. When her husband wouldn't let her call the shots, she delivered a shot to her husband. Find the defendant guilty. Thank you.
Closing arguments, Your Honor.
You may proceed.
Have you ever thought of leaving it all behind? We have presented to you that question multiple times throughout this trial, but the fact of the matter is the answer is yes. We have all thought of leaving it all behind, and so did Dawn Clark. But the only difference was Dawn Clark didn't just think about leaving it all behind. He did leave it all behind. But let's look at the evidence. Specifically, Dawn Clark's phone records. As identified in one of the exhibits, it identifies that the 4th phone call that Dawn Clark made was to an individual in Costa Rica. The call lasted 52 minutes and occurred just hours before he left for Costa Rica. Next, the 7th and 8th text message received by Don Clark. Also from an individual in Costa Rica, the words say, "Call me immediately." Finally, the 9th text message that Don Clark sent to Cara Bassett at 11:14 p.m., saying the words, "Going out for a while." That is reasonable doubt. You also heard the fact that Don Clark, or rather that Joe Young, discovered visual evidence identifying the fact that Don Clark still resides in that property. The fan was still spinning. The floor was spotless. Don Clark's clothes were still in his closet. Members of the jury, members of the community, even identified the fact that they had seen Don Clark near the time in which they were out. And that is reasonable doubt. You also heard from Joe Young in relation to the emotions of Cara Bassett after the disappearance. She was nothing short of crestfallen. And members of the jury, the fact of the matter is the defendant's grief defies the prosecution's claim of guilt. And that is reasonable doubt. But what do all these facts mean? Well, they mean that my client is not guilty. Once again, the prosecution had the burden of proof in today's case. And they had to prove to you beyond a reasonable doubt 3 things. 1, that Don Clark is dead. 2, that Cara Bassett killed him. And 3, that she did so with malice aforethought. They have failed on all 3 of their burdens. Because members of the jury, the prosecution has attempted to provide you a case based upon sympathy, emotion, and superficial ideations. But what they didn't tell you is that it's also based upon those 2 words, reasonable doubt. And reasonable doubt, upon reasonable doubt, upon reasonable doubt does not support a guilty verdict. Let's talk about the witnesses you heard from. First, Agent Braun, who identified the fact that the algae found on Cara Bassett's boots could have in fact originated from her own workplace. Agent Braun will note that he never found the body of Don Clark. Rather, he did note that, and he also identified the fact there were multiple other people who had both motive and opportunity to kill Don Clark. You also heard from Joe Young, who identified the fact that Cara Bassett said the words that she would take someone to their graves. Members of the jury, the fact of the matter is that was a faulty opinion. The fact of the matter is Don Clark, or rather Joe Young, heard earlier on the day of August 18th that she heard Don Clark say that he wanted to go to Costa Rica. But once again, consider that question. Have you ever thought of leaving it all behind? As the proof has shown, those are the very thoughts manifested within the mind of Don Clark. But once again, the prosecution has made what they would deem to be a tower of circumstantial evidence. Reasonable doubt, members of the jury, reasonable doubt is what they based it upon. It is because of those 2 words, their tower is faulty, even at its foundation. And because their tower is faulty, their tower of evidence has fallen. In their case, has failed. Opposing counsel presented the question as to who benefits. Cui bono, members of the jury, who benefited? Don Clark benefited. He wanted to leave his family behind, his friends behind, with no goodbyes and no eyewitnesses. Members of the jury, Don Clark didn't just think about leaving it all behind. He did leave it all behind. Which is why we ask that you find a verdict of not guilty. Thank you.
Prosecution,
Yes, Your Honor. Permission to proceed with rebuttal.
you may.
Members of the jury, where is Don Clark? He is lying at the bottom of the Big Gum Swamp. You know who really left it all behind? The defendant. She left all that remained of her husband behind in the swamp. We know she was there that night. We know that when her husband wouldn't let her call the shots, she delivered that shot and left her husband behind. Now, opposing counsel talked to you about Costa Rica. He told you that there was clothes in a closet. You can put clothes in a closet anytime and leave it there, but you can't survive without food. Was there food in the fridge? No. Now, Joe Young went to Costa Rica. He was there for a week, and did he ever see Don Clark? No, because he's not there. Find the defendant guilty. Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen. We will need just a few moments to complete our ballots. So please just give us a moment. Thank you.